welcome to my inaugural podcast called, and it will become very apparent slightly later, called Fathers and Son. It all kind of really started for me, because it's always about me, you know, the whole thing has nothing to do with where I want Dad to lead us all and whatever. It's always got to be about me. But back end of last year, I was asked by a DJ on GNet Radio, which is a small little radio in the Channel Islands. But basically, they wanted to know that the program was about the record business, the independent record producer, which thankfully, and I will be introducing you to my father, Mike Hurst, who's produced a few artists that you may or may not have heard of over the years. In fact, I would say that you've heard of absolutely all of them. But yes, one of the originators, record producers, independent record producers of the 60s, and also my father, Chris Pears, was also a founder director of Island Records. So basically, the program on GNet Radio was about the independent. They weren't schools, colleges, or saying this is how you become a record producer. This is how you start up a record company. So I'm thrilled that actually I can continue this, and I must introduce you to my father, Mike Hurst, and as I said, very successful record producer in the 60s and 70s. So Dad, first of all, just a little bit of an intro. How did you first get involved in the record industry? And then really leading on to that is, how did you become one of the originators, really, the independent record producer? Because as I said, they didn't have schools in those days.
Well, first bit when you said, how did you get into the record business? I was 16. I did an audition for Your Biological Dad,
Wow.
CP. And he couldn't do anything for me at the time. He got me a radio show as it happened. I did a series called Teen Scene on BBC Live Programme. That was in 64. Did that, but then nothing much happened until my mother. And I got to tell you, it's always mums. Mums are the best things in your life. You do realize that, because they're out for you. And my mum answered an ad in the stage newspaper, said, wanted young singer-guitarists for a well-established group. Didn't say who they were. And she got a reply. And the lovely thing about my mum, as indeed in all mums, is she never told me she'd applied for this audition in case I didn't get it, when I'd be disappointed. So when she got the okay, then she told me. So I went for an audition. I still didn't know who it was for, but the greatest thing was I met a guy who met me at the door of Quaglino's in St. James's in London. And he was wearing a British warm overcoat, and he had a monocle in his eye. He said, Michael. And I said, yeah. He said, I'm Captain Emlyn Griffiths. So I said, yeah. And he said, you're on next, don't worry. He said, be out in a minute. He disappeared back into the club. So I waited in the little lobby there. And a guy walked out of the place carrying a guitar case, and I recognized him immediately. I said to myself, that's Donnie Donegan's guitarist. I said, what hope have I got? This guy's been on TV quite a lot. Anyway, I went in to do the audition, and I got on this little stage, and I stood there with a guitar, and this voice said, Mike, sing us a song. So I said, anything? So he said, yeah. So I sang Mesa Blues, Elvis Presley. Finished it, and another voice piped up and said, can you sing a song in a foreign language? I thought, God almighty, this isn't rock and roll. It can't be. This is absurd. Fortunately, this is where you get lucky. My grandfather was Italian. So I'd grown up listening to him singing Italian folk songs. So I knew one called Lazzarella. So I sang this song, finished it, and the voice said, very good, we'll get back to you. And I thought, like hell you will. Never works like that. So I walked out with my little frameless guitar in a cardboard box, which it was, And 2 weeks later, I got a letter signed by Tom Springfield, said, we'd like you to join the Springfields. That was it. Simple as that. I got lucky.
Yeah, as I said, sometimes you've got to make your luck. I mean, was there a defining moment in the audition you suddenly thought, do you know, actually, I kind of smashed that? Or, no, actually, I've got two hopes here. Bob and no being...
That's your favourite saying.
Yeah.
Well, no, I didn't think anything would happen. But the great thing about Tom Springfield and Dusty at the time was, the deal was, everything was split three ways. Now, they could have said to me, we'll pay you a salary and we're taking the rest. Never. It was a three-way split. And so that was that. And what happened within, it seemed like minutes, except it wasn't minutes, it was a few weeks. Suddenly, we got a call, a record company got a call from America, said, your group, the Springfields, is in the American top 50. And we all thought, my God. And next thing, it's in the top 20. So suddenly the Springfields, the first British group to have a hit record in America, in history. So there I was, 3-4 months before. I'd been a kid who'd been working at Lloyd's in London, insurance. God's waiting room, terrible. And then suddenly I'm flying to America.
What was the song that was flying high?
Silver Threads and Golden Needles, country classic. Since then you've had Dolly Parton, Loretta Lynn, Tammy Wynette. They've all done that song.
And of course Linda Ronstadt.
And Linda Ronstadt. So, yeah, there we were. And the funniest thing was, of course, when we got to America, they were so disappointed to see us. You know why? Because we were English. They thought we were an American group. When they found out we were English, they thought, God, these kids can't sing country music, that's it. And we went to Nashville, and they thought the same way. And they treated us like, I won't say like dirt, they didn't do that. But they treated us in this very offhand way. Yeah, we'll do the next track and everything. And I hated the songs. They were so corny. No, they really were talking about mountain boys and stuff like that. Listen, I came from Maida Vale. We had no bloody mountains. So that's life. But it took me there. It took me where I'd always wanted to go.
And did you meet any of the big American stars out there? I mean, you know, at the time, who were the kind of American stars? Was it still kind of...
Well, for me, the thrill of it was the bass player
Bobbies.
on the Nashville sessions. The bass player was Bill Black, who was Elvis's bass player. I got Elvis's bass player on here. They also brought in the Jordanaires, Elvis's backing vocal group, because they thought if we made any mistakes, the Jordanaires could fill in and do it themselves and everything, which is another slight insult. But it was great to meet them and everything. And then Tommy Cash, Johnny Cash's brother, one of his brothers, Tommy arrived, said, well, we'd like to meet Johnny, and I met Johnny. And that's a whole other story, you know that.
Is this the one I've always loved, the one that jumping out of windows? And
The Nashville Holiday Inn, sure. It had a balcony, there's only 2 stories. It had a balcony around the first story to the swimming pool down below. And Cash, who was drunk as a skunk, he said, you swim, son? So I said, yeah. He said, come with me. And he got up on top of this balustrade. He said, hold my hand. And I held his hand. And he said, now jump. And he pulled me. And we fell off this balustrade straight down into the swimming pool. We met the concrete apron, or missed the concrete apron, by about that much. Mad as a bloody hatter. But that was Cash. So yeah, things like that happened. Ray Stevens, Bridget the Midget.
Queen of the Blues.
The Queen of the Blues, met Ray. Yeah, all sorts of people. But America was a tremendous eye-opener for me. I loved every minute of it. So did Dusty.
And Tom,
Tom. Tom's a different story. Tom hated performing. Now, can you imagine that, being in the music business and hating performing? Actually, Adele hates performing, apparently. But Tom hated it. He used to take a sleeping pill before we went on stage. And I'd look at him when we got through the first number, and he'd be glassy-eyed, wasn't with us. And Tom didn't like America at all. Dusty and I loved him.
I've always been kind of fascinated. I mean, where did Tom's kind of? I mean, he wrote those. I mean, crazy. Whether or not you like it, and Island of Dreams and what, he wrote some amazing songs. And I mean, where did he get his inspiration from? When you're saying that he didn't like, like kind of performing in front of people, and he wasn't the most outgoing, sociable person.
You got to realise, Tom, where Tom came from. He came from cabaret. Now, cabaret is a thing that's disappeared. Nobody knows. The younger generations have no knowledge of what cabaret really was. Cabaret was music for the rich people in nightclubs in London and elsewhere. Tom came out of that with, there was a guy called Lance Percival.
Oh,
who
yes.
was on the show called That Was the Week It Was. And he and Tom had this cabaret act. So that's where Tom came from cabaret. He wasn't into pop, he certainly wasn't into rock and roll. I was, and being in the Springfields was a bit weird for me because I thought originally I'd be in rock and roll, and I wasn't. So what were the Springfields? Were the Springfields a cabaret act, a folk act, a country act, a pop act? Yeah, the answer is a combination of all those things. That's what we were.
Did you ever do should we say, an upbeat song with the Springfields, as opposed to, as you were saying, the classic kind of country songs?
Yeah, we did do an up-to-date, if you like, song, because the Beatles made sure we had to do that. I mean, the Beatles made us honorary members of their fan club, the Cavern in Liverpool, in '62. And the Beatles' music was so damn good. I mean, we knew how good it was. So Tom wrote a song called Down and Out. If I was down and out, would you still care? And he wrote it sounded like a Beatles song. So we were trying to sort of catch up with them, which was impossible. But that's where we were. We were still that combination of these 4 or 5 different types of music. We weren't the Beatles. We knew how good they were. We knew our time was up. But I didn't realize how soon our time was up. Because what happened was, we were sitting in the Winter Gardens in Blackpool waiting to do a band check for the show that night. And Dusty suddenly said, "Why don't we break up?"
Oh.
Now, I'm serious. It was as stark as that. Tom said, "Yeah." And I said, 19, 20 years old, I thought, what the hell? Oh, this is a good idea. So I said, "Yeah, it's fine, idiot." So that's what the agreement was, to break up. Now, what I didn't know was Dusty had already recorded I Only Want to Be With You. They never told me. If they told me that, I think I would have hit the roof, because that's a bit dicey, a bit dodgy. It's the wrong thing to do. But that's the way it goes in the music business. And we broke up. That's it.
Was Tom already writing songs for the Seekers? I mean, obviously he had, he thought, well, here's a vehicle very similar to a successful, I mean, you were riding high. I mean, you had another, what was the, so I mean, obviously.
Oh, Say I Won't Be There.
Say I Won't Be There. I mean, yeah, that was a big hit as well.
Listen, I mean, we were voted for 2 years running, 62, 63, the top British group. Beatles were the best newcomers. I love that, the best newcomers. I sat with McCartney at Wembley when we were waiting to do the show. And I said, "Paul," I said, "what you want to do is change your name." He said, "Why?" He said, "What's wrong with McCartney?" I said, no, I don't mean McCartney, I mean Beatles. I said, no one's going to buy records by people called Beatles. He didn't forget that one. Every time I saw him for the next few years, he said, so? I said, yeah, okay. So yeah, the Beatles, it was a whole different world. The 60s really started in 1963. That's when the 60s music scene really kicked off. You know it.
Yeah, it must have been though. I mean, there you were, a pop star, which is, let's face it, when anybody goes into a band, so when Dusty kind of announced, oh, by the way, hello, goodbye, as we were just on the Beatles, so my apologies, folks. I mean, you must have been very disappointed. And what was that kind of moment? Did you then think, right, actually, I'm going to set up a band, or I want to go solo because actually I rather like, because unlike Tom, you like performing. You said that you like performing.
I started a band in 64, you're quite right. And what a band. What a band. Albert Lee on guitar, Tony Ashton on keyboards, who'd done Resurrection Shuffle.
Yeah.
I had a fantastic, Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page was with me as well.
How old was he?
Jimmy was 17. We had one of the best rock and roll bands you could hope to hear. We were really good. We toured with various people at that time. Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, Cilla Black, Bobby V, Gene Pitney. We had a great band. But it didn't last. That's the way it goes.
It didn't last because you wanted the success, or the record company wanted the success like that, or was it because actually...
We couldn't get any further, and I'll tell you why. We had our record producer, Johnny Franz. I mean, Johnny said to me when we first went in to record the new band, he said, now, he smoked, Johnny Franz, the producer, like a chimney stack at a power station. And he was covered in ash, which is where I always swore Kenny Everett got his ash-covered.
Yeah,
you remember.
I remember. Yeah. Oh,
and he'd be like this, his cigarette, and ash would fall down there. And he looked at me when we were doing the first session with the new group, and he said, "The trouble with that boy there playing guitar, he can't read music." This is Jimmy Page. I said, "I don't think anybody really needs to read music." I said, "This is rock and roll." He said, "No, he'll never make anything of himself at all." I thought, "Oh yeah, great." So we lasted about 9 months to a year. We split and parted. That was it. No more Mike Hurst and the Methods. It was all over. So what did I do?
Yes. So brings me to, what did you do?
It was your mum.
Ah.
Your mum looked at me and said, "This is not good. This is not good. We haven't got any money because you spent it all." Yeah, I had spent it all. This is rock and roll. I spent it all on cars and everything else. I just had a ball. But we ran out of money. So I said, "What do I do?" She said, "Why don't you?" It's true. And your mother is the most unmusical person I've ever come across. Your mother said to me, "Why don't you become a record producer?" So I said, "I haven't got the foggiest idea how to do that. How do you?" She said, "Well, what did your producer do, Johnny Franz?" I said, "I'll tell you what he did. He had a copy of the Daily Telegraph open on the control desk." He said, and he'd be reading it during a session. And at the end of a take, he'd press a button and he'd say, "You are flat on letter B." He said, "Let's take it from letter C," and go back to reading the paper. And I thought, this can't be right. She said, "You could do that." And I said, "Yeah, I could do that, but I'm not going to. I want to be a proper record producer." So I said I had to learn how to do this. So Mickey Most was the first truly, or Joe Meek was actually the first independent record producer, but Mickey was the first mainstream record producer of pop. And I went to him and I said, "Mickey, can you give me some work to do? I want to be a record producer." So he gave me his crap. what he didn't want to work on and what he didn't want to produce. He said, Mike, you can do this. So I went in and made a couple of records for him and started learning the errors of your ways in the studios, or the good things on your way in the studio. And bugger me, Barry St. John, who was a female session singer, we did this track called Come Away Melinda, which I thought was one of the worst things I'd ever heard. I hadn't heard Bob Dylan by that stage. And
Oh, meow.
This Come Away Melinda. And blow me down the record charts. It's in the top 40. Mickey, as soon as the record looked as if it was going to go in the charts, altered the label information on the record to say produced by Mickey Most. I'd done it. And there's a chart record. That was my first chart record. So I gave up on Mickey then and went to a man called Andrew Loog Oldham, who was starting a label called Immediate. And I said the same thing to Andrew, can I produce some stuff for you? So he did the same thing. He gave me his rubbish he didn't want to do. But then it got good, because one thing he came to me with, he said he had this girl singer who was one of the Ikettes, Ike and Tina Turner's backing singers, called Pat Arnold, P.P. Arnold. And he said, could you produce? Well, I got lucky, because before that point, a guy had come into an office I was working in and said, could he play me some songs? And the guy sat down with a guitar and he played me a song. And the song was Here Comes My Baby. And I listened to this and I said, that's really good, what's your name? And he said, Stephen Georgiou. He said, but I changed it to Stephen Adams. He said, now I've changed it again, but it's such a stupid name, I'm going to change it again. I said, stop. I said, this is 3 names you've given me. What is your stupid name at the moment then? He said, my stupid name's Cat Stevens. I said, that is one of the best names I've heard. I said, keep the name. He did. Until he became, of course, Yusuf Islam in 1981. That's a 5th name. And Yusuf Cat Stevens, that's a 6th name. But his songs, I thought, were so good. I took him to a guy called Jim Economides, who I was doing some work for, an American. I said, listen to this guy. So Jim listened to Steve, and Jim looked at me and said, he's shit. And I said, no. I said, he's really, really good. He said, well, I'm not interested in him. You take him. So I booked a studio in London, and we went in and did Here Comes My Baby, Smash Your Heart, another couple of songs, 4 tracks. And I tried to get people interested in these, and nobody was interested at all. What would ultimately happen with Here Comes My Baby is the Tremolos did it and had a #1 with it.
Personally, I think they murdered it, but that's my...
No, you're right.
What do I know?
No, you're right. So he'd written many other songs, and first of all, listen, I'm digressing because I was talking about P.P. Arnold, but it all leads from Cat Stevens, because 3 or 4 months later, there's a knock on my door in Priory Road where we were living. You were living. And there's Cat Stevens standing there with a guitar case. He said, I've tried every record company in London. He said, and nobody wants to know about me. I said, you got any new songs? He said, yeah, I'll play you this. And he sat down and played me a song called I Love My Dog. I said, oh, that's a hit. And he said, well, I've played it for people. He said, nobody wants to know. I said, I want to know. I said, I'll find the money. I'll produce it. We'll make it. And I'll try and do a deal. And that was it from then on with Cat. And you know what happened.
Yeah. But I love the story, the way you got into the studio.
Well,
because you weren't really there supposedly there to do some songs with Cat Stevens. You were supposed to be doing the songs because the record company, you had kind of giving them a little white lie, saying that you were off to the States to produce?
It wasn't actually a lie, because I wasn't making any money still. And I wrote to record companies in America and said, have you got a job for a staff producer? And Vanguard Records in San Francisco came back to me and said, yeah, we'll take you. So your mum, me, and you, and Lexi, your sister, were all going to go to America and live in San Francisco. And that was when Cat Stevens, as I said, arrived back on the scene. And I listened to I Love My Dog, said, we'll do it. And I didn't have all the money to make it. I only had the money for the musicians. But I went to Decca Records, saw Dick Rowe, and sat down with him and said, I want to make a farewell record because I'm going to America. And I got this great song by Mike Darbo called Going, Going, Gone. I'd like to record it. So Dick Rowe listened to it. He said, yes, yes. He said, sounds nice. He said, just for old time's sake, he said, you can have 3 hours in the studio. So for 3 hours in the studio, I went in, I made I Love My Dog. I listened to the arrangement the first time through, and I thought, Jesus, I'm a bit worried about this. It sounds really out of it, out there somewhere. I don't know where, but not a normal British pop record. And I took it into Dick Rowe and I said, look, Dick, I said, I lied to you. I have done Going, Going, Gone, the song, but I really wanted to do a track, 2 tracks, with this guy called Cat Stevens. Dick threw his arms up and said, that is so dishonest, I can't believe it. I said, listen to the record, listen. So we put the acetate on, he listened to it. First thing he did was pick up the telephone. He said, put me through to Sir Edward. Sir Edward Lewis, the chairman and one of the godfathers of the British record industry. He arrived down the stairs to Dick's office. He said, what's happening? So Dick said, you've got to listen to this. Put I Love My Dog on. And Sir Edward Lewis turned around and looked at me and said the unforgettable words, my boy, you are a genius. And that was that. They put it out. It was the first record ever on DRAM to be a hit. Decca's new label, DRAM. And bang, you've made it. You've done it. You've got a hit record. It's what it's all about.
I mean, please, for those who obviously who might not know who Dick Rowe is or was, Dad, take it away. See, as I said, he was one of the big. Well, he was one of the big names.
Record company man.
Record company man.
What you're alluding to, and I know what it is, Dick Rowe's known famously as the man who turned down the Beatles. I happen to think that's incredibly unfair. Why? Because he signed the Rolling Stones.
Absolutely.
You can't expect to get everything right. He didn't. He got the Stones right and the Beatles wrong. That's life.
But you said I can remember you said that you heard the demos with other
the Beatles.
Yeah, of the Beatles, and said
Terrible.
actually nobody would have really.
I wouldn't have signed them. My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. It was bloody awful. But that was it. They wrote their own songs, however. That's what made it happen. Yeah. So there I am with a hit record. Finally, I Love My Dog. It's all happening.
And then after Cat Stevens, or was it during the success with Cat Stevens that Andrew Loog Oldham had immediate,
Okay.
or say that immediate, and the other bands that, because all of a sudden you were the man of the moment, weren't you? The producer of the moment.
Yeah, now we've caught up in time. You're quite right, Tim. Yeah, okay. That's right. I mean, Matthew and Son came out. That's the next one.
Oh, great
Matthew and
song.
Son says it's number 2 in the charts. I nearly had my first number 1. Number 2. And the radio stations, the pirate stations went mad for it and everything else. Great, fantastic. So there I was, all this is happening. Andrew Oldham turns up, says, would you like to produce this girl who was one of the Ikettes? And Steve, Cat Stevens, had played me a song he'd written called First Cut is the Deepest. Oh boy. So I said, I'd like to do this to Andrew Oldham. And he said, yeah, fine. He said, sounds great to me, do it. So we went into Olympic Sound Studios in Barnes, and I had always been influenced by, well, not always, but mostly, two people in record production. Phil Spector, yes, of course, and Brian Wilson, Beach Boys, same thing. So I wanted to do my sound. So what I did with the studios in Barnes, Olympic, for the session, I had two of everything. I had two bass players, two drummers, two keyboard players, big string section, big horn section. It was like flying a jumbo jet. We had a huge desk at the Olympic. I had 40 musicians out there at #1 studio, and we did First Cut. And I love that. I mean, if anybody ever says to me, what are you proud of? There are lots of things probably I'm not proud of because you do it because you're in the business. But First Cut, I'm so proud of. It's just, for me, it's just a great record. And that was the beginning of P.P. Arnold's career. It's another hit for Cat Stevens because it was his song. The timing was just right.
What I've always loved, I mean, one, it is just a classic song. And there's always the argument, and I've always loved the argument, which is the ultimate version? Is it you and Cat Stevens? Is it the Pat Arnold? Is it the Sheryl Crow? I mean, and there have been some bloody great versions, but again, I've always loved I love the phone-ins, and actually 9 times out of 10, it does come. It tends to be the winner is P.P. Arnold.
Yeah, for me it'll always be P.P. Arnold. I mean, I sang on the original one with Cat.
And you produced both versions as
I
well.
produced both versions, but no, P.P. Arnold's the best version because she sings it with so much soul and so much power. That's what's got it for me. I mean, Rod Stewart's version I never liked.
Oh, yeah, another one.
But that's life. You like some, you lose some. He had a #1 with it, for God's sake. He had the biggest hit. So you can't be too mean.
Oh, no, but I mean, again, it's, and again, I have to kind of lead you down there. I mean, you have produced so many great records with a huge eclectic roster of artists. So it brings me to, I mean, you've had hits like Under the Moon of Love, which was not, sure what he wanted, didn't do the original.
Yeah, I've got to tell you,
So which cover version that you have produced would you say you are most proud of? I'm not talking about records, so which is the one that you thought, right, that's the song I want to do? Which one is your particular one that you'd say, I'd go back to the studio and actually I wouldn't change anything?
Listen, it all depends. Looking at it logically, there's a stuff flying around there. It all depends. You see, the funny thing about records and songs in general is very often you're convinced something's going to be a hit and it's not. Some things you think will always be a hit and it's not. But you make your move. You say, right, damn it, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it that way. I mean, I've turned people down who ended up having huge hits. I mean, the point is, Arthur Brown.
Fire.
Dear Arthur Brown. He did an audition for me. And I used to take a nightclub in London called the Pigalle. Every Wednesday afternoon, I opened it for auditions for anybody who wanted to come. And I went down there one Wednesday afternoon. There's this guy standing there with hair down to his shoulders. And he said, hello, my name's Arthur. And I looked at him and said, hello, Arthur, how you doing? And he said, I said, I'm all right, man. He said, I've got a great song for you. I said, God, you sing fantastic. He said, I've just got to go and get my accoutrements. I said, you what? He said, my accoutrements. So he went round back of this little stage, came back with a cup on top of his head and a strap under his chin. And I looked at this guy. I started to smile. I said, hey. And he said, I've got my keyboard player here, so I'll do it for you now, you see. So he said, go. And the piano player starts to bum, 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 da-da-da, bum, bum, bum. And suddenly the guy goes, I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you fire. Do-do-do. And when he started singing, he took out a lighter and he flicked it, and he lit the cup on top of his head, and flames shot up here. I am laughing. It's the funniest thing I've seen. Then it got funnier because he had hair down to his shoulders which caught fire, both sides. And he had smoke coming out, looked like his ears coming out. And I had tears running down here. It's the funniest thing ever. And he finished and he said, son, man, he said, what you think? I said, Arthur, that's the funniest thing I've ever seen. I said, you go on a talent show on TV like New Faces. I said, you can't miss. You'll win. Oh, no. I said, yeah, I'm sorry, and everything. 3 months later, he was #1 all over the world with that record. So being a record producer, you make mistakes. That's the way of life.
I said, you win some,
You lose some.
You lose some.
Sure.
But you've just mentioned one of those talent shows. Again, I think it was an opportunity not you just mentioned. I cannot remember.
You're back to Shawadi Wadi.
No, I'm not, because it wasn't Shawadi Wadi, was it?
What, on a talent show? Who?
And again, it brings you back. It also kind of back to
Yeah, I
that
know.
country New World,
New World.
Rose Garden and Tom Turnaround.
Yeah, Tana, yeah, I'm not sure.
I mean, I have to.
Not my
Yeah,
favourite.
But again, did you know, Dad? Did you know that New World were actually? I mean, they sold a lot of records. Let's face it.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure how.
Thankfully, they're in Australia, aren't they?
But yeah, thank God. Yeah, I mean, Rose Garden was a big hit I did with them. Tom Turnaround, which I thought was, oh God, Mickey Most found that song because it was on his label we did
Of
it
course, it
for.
was right. Yes.
And I couldn't bear it. I really couldn't bear it. But I did it, which you do sometimes. And as I say, it was a big hit record, so that's life again. #2 in the charts, I think. So it goes.
Did you again? Just going back to a little bit of this. I mean, was Rose Garden? Was that a song that you picked for New World? So, I mean, because as you said, it was a huge hit for Lynn Anderson.
No, I got to be fair. I'll always be fair. I know he's no longer with us, but Mickey Most chose that song. And I've always said this about Mickey. Old bugger that he was a great song picker. Fantastic. And it was his choice. He chose the song, I produced it. So I'm grateful for that.
Oh yeah, I mean that and Lynn Anderson. I mean, it was never off the radio. Was
No,
it?
both versions were in the top 10.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
you could do that in those days. Not now.
But again, sorry, leading you, and I know you. I mean, it must be difficult because you have produced so many hit records. But what do you think the best cover version that you think that you're not you think you're the proudest? I mean, was it?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've said what I didn't like doing. I can tell you what I did like doing. Colin Blunston, She's Not There.
Oh,
Now, they'd had the hit with, originally, of course, with the Zombies, Colin as lead singer. But I changed the whole thing around. He wanted, one of the nicest things said to me by an artist was Colin when he said, I want your sound. That's magic. Someone says that to you, you think, yeah,
you feel you've got to
that's
feel
my
that
sound,
good.
that's great. So we did She's Not There with a big orchestra and everything. And Colin always says he prefers that to the original version of the Zombies.
It was your Phil Spector moment, really.
Yeah, it was my Phil Spector moment.
Because you
Except I
said you
didn't
used
shoot
two of
I didn't
everything.
shoot anybody.
The only thing you didn't do is that you didn't use the bath, and you didn't throw the bath into the production or whatever. Because
No.
But oddly enough, I think before this podcast last year, I did this sort of interview with Jeanette, And oddly enough, with Gina, they chose some and played a lot of Dad's 70s productions. And actually, a few of them, and I might be a little bit biased, but you know, there was For Your Love by the Four Tops, and they played, so they played a few of Dad's songs. And actually, the one that they got inundated, that they loved, was
She's Not There.
She's Not There, because people have forgotten it. And also, again, it comes to, did you change his name? Was that Colin Blunstone wanted to get away from the zombies? Because, of course, he had basically retired until you said, oi, get back into the recording
He's always
studio.
said, thank God you got me back into the record business. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's his version is special. Colin Blunstone has a special voice, has a great voice, fantastic. And it worked really, really well. And those times were fantastic. That was just 1970, 69, 70. And it worked. He got out of the insurance business, which was a big mistake in the first place. And yeah, he came back.
Yeah, with a little, as they go back to Santa, with a little help from yourself.
Yeah, true.
And he would never have had I Don't Believe in Miracles and Say You Don't Mind and whatever. I mean, as you said. So you'd say that's got to be one of your finest, proudest?
Absolutely. The number one, of course, the next number one was Shawari Wari.
No.
And that's one of the funniest things. I got to tell you this, Malk, one of Shawari Wari's drummers, he said to me, which I always thought was great, I went up to a pub he owned in Derbyshire, and he said, Mike, he said, now we finished in here in the pub. He said, I've got to take you out to my house and show you something. His house turned out to be a caravan, a big caravan, like a mobile home. And I walked in there and stood there for a moment, looked around, and Malk said, Mike, he said, you know how you and I always thought we chose the songs for the recording? I said, yeah. He said, well, he said, I got to tell you. He said, it were him that done it. And he pointed up to a corner, and there was nobody else in the caravan. And I thought, he's round the bend. And I said, what? He said, him there in the cage. And I looked and he took the cover off, and there's a bloody great parrot in a cage. And I said, Mark, you've lost the plot. And he said, no, he said, what I used to do was come home, he said, put a song on, and if the parrot danced to it, it weren't it. I said, Mark. He said, no, he said, I'll show you. And he put a record on, but it doesn't matter who, someone, I can't remember. And the parrot didn't move a muscle. I thought it was stuffed. And the next thing is he puts on Under the Moon of Love, and the parrot starts going. So a parrot shows a number one. It's great. Beat Mickey most.
So you'd say that, you know, what makes a great song is find yourself a parrot that basically
Get
is going to
yourself
move and groove.
A musical parrot. Yeah. Shawari Wari were really funny. I mean, hey, rock and roll. You got to look. Everyone's naive when they enter a business. Any business, it's new to you. You don't know what to do. Shawari Wari had never been in a recording studio before. And Buddy, when we did Hey Rock and Roll, Buddy, who was the lead singer then, Buddy said it was really loud on one aspect of the track. And I pressed the talk back and I said, Buddy, I said, you got to back off when you get to this point. He said, how do I do that? I said, I tell you what, I said, the engineer and I come out there, take one arm each and pull you back from the microphone, and when you get to the next bit, we put you back in again. So he said, aye. So we did the next take, and he was loud as ever and hadn't moved. So I stopped the track, pressed the talk back. I said, Buddy, what happened? He said, nobody come out. He believed that he had to be moved physically, which I loved. Oh. So Shawari Wari, we had a stack of hits. I mean, dear God.
People forget, I think they had
17 hits in a row. I mean, that's a lot of hit records.
Yeah. by any stretch of the
It's
imagination.
a lot of hit records for people who are putting money across the counter. Now people say, oh, I've had 41 number ones. No, they haven't. They've had 41 tracks that are downloaded and streamed and everything else lots of times, but it's not the same thing because most people only listen to 35, 40 seconds of a track, I think, today.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Moving on to the next, which is fair enough, that's the way it is. But then it's hard cash over the counter. So you knew you were making money.
Well, you only have to look at some of your discs here. That Cat Stevens one, and you start looking at the amount of copies, that sold. And looking at the looking at the Shawaddy Woody one you've got up there, that's an awful lot of hit records. An awful lot of hit
Yeah, it
records.
is. Plus 5 hit albums. I mean, come on, it's a lot of records.
Yeah. Today, I mean, are there any bands? I mean, there aren't any bands like Shawaddy Woody because, as you said, they don't have, there aren't that many bands who've had 40 odd hit records or whatever. Are there any bands that you'd say that, today you think, they are great, or they could be great if they, I mean, for example, one of your other artists that you really put put on the map, and I mean, he was one of the biggest selling artists in the 80s, and you know where I'm going.
I do.
Shaky, for
Shaky.
example. I mean, you plucked him from the West End, and he was one of the biggest selling artists of the 80s. I mean, so for example, he's gone over to, I understand, he's now singing folk music.
I can't believe that.
So, as his kind of ex-producer, is that where you kind of imagined that Shaky would go? Are there any artists you think, actually, he should record? Do you still listen to the, you hear on the radio and think, he should record this song, or he should go down the country side, or the folk side? I mean, Shaky, obviously, folk music wasn't for Shaky.
Well, I mean, what happened with Shakin' Stevens was I produced him for Track Records originally, and nothing really happened. We nearly had a hit with Never, but it didn't. As it turned out, it never happened.
Very good. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, that was it. But then Elvis died in '77, and 2 years later, there's the Elvis show on in London. And I saw on all the posters, Shakin' Stevens was one of the Elvises. So I went backstage to see him after I'd seen the show, which, by the way, was fantastic. God, it was a good stage show. And he was fantastic. And I went backstage to see him afterwards, and he said, I'm having a bad time. And I said, what is it? He said, I haven't got a manager. He said, and I'm only earning 150 quid a week. I said, you're making 150 quid a week in a West End show? That's ridiculous. He said, well, I haven't got a manager. I said, do you want one now? He said, yeah, why not? He said, would you do it? I said, sure. I went to see Brian Ricks, who ran the theatre, the Apollo in London, Charing Cross Road, the Astoria, rather. And I said to Brian Ricks, who owned the theatre, I said, you can't pay Shakin' Stevens that sort of money for a hit West End show. He said, well, I have him under contract. I said, you got a problem. I said, because he'll be ill by the end of the week. He said, what? I said, he'll be ill. And then he'll be ill for the week after, and the week after. And then see what happens to the show. So I got him from 150 quid a week, I got him to £900 a week. And I went to CBS Records and I said, you heard of Shakin' Stevens, he's in the Elvis show. And Dan Loggins, Kenny Loggins' brother, Dan Loggins, who was A&R guy at CBS, said, he's just a rock and roll clone. And I said, I'll tell you what, I said, I'll take you to see the show tomorrow night. Took Dan Loggins in to see the show the following night. We finished the show, he walked out with me, Dan, and he said, bring him into the studios tomorrow at CBS. He said, I'll have a contract waiting for you. And that was it. And Shaky, bang. Hot Dog, first hit record.
She's my baby.
Hot Dog, yeah. So, yeah, got lucky again.
One thing I've kind of noticed over the years is that letters, their letter S.
It's all S.
Well, I
Springfield,
think-
Shawaddy
hang on,
Waddy,
your-
Shaking
yeah,
Stevens,
Yeah,
Cat
your
Stevens.
kick-off being the Springfield.
It's Springfield. It's scary. I've said that for years to your mum. I've said that for years. It's all about the S's. All my animals, therefore, have been called
I don't like that. I've never
letters
thought of that.
started with S. Scary. What went wrong with Mike Hurst? I have
I gotta
no
say, the
idea.
methods didn't start with
The
an S
methods
there.
didn't. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. But hey, listen, being a record producer, you got to understand that there are three things I think you have to be. One, it helps to be a musician. Two, you have to be a diplomat. Three, you have to be a nanny. Because artists are like children. They're like little children. Shaky used to say to me, we'd be in the studios and he'd say, I think it's in the wrong key, that track. And I say, Shaky, you fix the key. I told you to fix the key. He said, yeah, but it doesn't sound like he did in the bathroom. I said, in the bathroom? I said, what were you doing? He said, it's echo, you see. It's the echo in the bathroom. I said, it's
I love
ridiculous.
that.
And then he'd choke up, oh, I can't take any more of this. And I said, but Shaky, you're 35 years old. You can't be like this. And he'd disappear and he'd go home, bless his heart. He's a lovely guy. And he'd go home and he'd be cracked up for at least a week before he'd come back into the studio. And that's, as I say, that's life. You got to be a nanny. You got to be a diplomat. A diplomat because artists also have this thing about, I'm going to do that. And you say, no, because I'm producing this. I'm going to do this. No, I want to do it. And it's no good just simply then saying, get out. You can't do that. So then you have to start the diplomacy. Well, if I do this now and it works, it'll be fine. But if it doesn't, we can go back in together and start talking. You have to play the game. If you don't play the game, you're all over with an artist.
I mean, again, has there been a particular artist or artists that you thought, that was just a walk in the park, they are fantastic? Or has there been when you thought, I really don't care how successful they are or they become, I just couldn't do it ever again? But again, is that coming back down to you've got to hold their hands and look, and also kind of be careful about how wide a doorway is because of managing their egos.
I did a session with a guy called Dick Rivers, and he was a Frenchman with a great name, Dick Rivers. So we made a couple of records, and we were all sitting round, and my guitarist, a wonderful guy, the late Ray Fennick,
Oh,
he said to Dick Rivers, where did you get the name, you're French, Dick Rivers from? And he said, well, it is because of the Elvis Presley film, Loving You. So I looked at him and I said, the character he played in Loving You, Elvis, was Dick Rivers. Dick. So he said, yes, that is what I am, a Dick. We broke up and cracked up. And I said, so you're a dick? He said, yes, I am a dick. The French have no idea about rock and roll. Really don't. Yeah, so listen, the artists in my life I really love working with most of them. The Four Tops was the greatest experience, though, I think, forever. Levi Stubbs, the lead singer, late lead singer, Levi. What a voice. Oh, my God, what a voice. You know what's wonderful about him? Normally you go into a studio with your average everyday artist and you get to take number 40, take number 50, take number 60. Drives you around the bend. Him, Levi, Four Tops, huge group, successful group worldwide. He'd go in the studio, he'd do a take, I'd think it was the best thing I'd heard, and I'd say, Levi, fantastic. He said, could I leave now? And I said, sure. And that was it, one take. Levi recorded in one take. That's marvellous.
And you had which orchestra it was on? You have a
Well, on the Four Tops?
Yeah.
We used Tamla Motown rhythm section.
that. I mean, that
they
has
were-
to be quite high on your proudest moments to, to produce the Four Tops. I mean, who, as you said, I mean, how many records did they have? I mean, that
Well,
was
a
that
lot.
was a great.
I don't
song.
think any other white man produced them. They had black producers. So I was lucky. And they treated me very well. They could have been very difficult with me, but they weren't. They were charming.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. That again is one of the songs that was played on GNet Radio at the time when we were doing the independent producer and whatever. And that was another one. I mean, obviously the Colin Blunstone one. I think one that if there was a competition, it was She's Not There was the one that won that competition.
Oh, sure.
Hands down. And it's nice because, of course, actually, rather like the Cat Stevens and rather like the Colin Blunstones, you've never fallen out with these people. Shaky, for example, he back in touch. So really, I mean, when I'm sure there's a lot of clash of egos with producers saying, no, that's the sound I want, that's the direction I want you to go in. You would have thought that there was going to be, dueling at midnight or whatever, but you've kept in touch with a lot of your old artists. And I mean, for example, you're doing something soon in August on behalf of Parkinson's, where actually some of your old art, they want to come back and
They've all come out and said, yeah, they'll all appear in the show, which is fantastic. But you're painting me out as a really nice guy now.
well, you're my father.
I wasn't always. I wasn't
I think it'd
always.
be a little.
I wasn't always like that. I mean, I could lose the plot quite easily.
But you always said with Yusuf, with Steve, that you were at the time you were young.
Well,
and
we fell out.
You were both young.
Yeah, we fell out. The first time and only time we fell out was when he parted company with me. And the reason he parted company with me is the truth is I didn't see what he wanted to become. He wanted to change his style. He wanted to be this. He had it firmly in his mind. And I disagreed with him. And as it turns out, I was wrong. And when we split, I lost my temper completely with him and with his lawyer. I mean, it was not pleasant. But that's life. And to tell you how things revert and things change is 10, 15 years later, we hadn't seen one another. And we walked into a preview cinema, I'd been invited to see a Cat Stevens story movie. And he was so pleased to see me, I couldn't believe it. And then, to top it all, I took you to Westminster Hall, if you remember.
Oh, and I was so proud.
You were.
So proud.
Do you want to tell him what he said? Or shall I?
He said it was lovely.
On
'cause
stage.
This is on stage. And actually, it's one of those odd things. And yes, I have had a privileged upbringing. But actually, I bumped into somebody I was at school with. And in those days, when people knew that your father was a very well-known record producer. Your father, my other father started Island Records. So people wanted to know me not because of me, because of both my fathers. And he said, it doesn't surprise me seeing you after all these years, because of course your dad, of course, discovered and produced Cat Stevens. And literally half an hour later, we're sitting in Westminster, not that large. But what was lovely was Dad's engineer was there, a gentleman called Vic Coppersmith-Heaven, who did the Jam, and he produced a few hit records. Vic Smith, and he was Dad's engineer. But what was lovely was that the lights came down, and Cat Stevens said, "I just want to say, if it wasn't," he said, "there's a couple of very old friends here, but he said, one gentleman in particular, Mike Hurst, if it wasn't for Mike Hurst," he said, "I wouldn't be here today. I would never have had the success I had today." And I have to say, as a son, or even if it was I've got to say, one of the proudest moments, because the lights had come round. Dad was kind of moving, shuffling away, and I'm going, Dad, I think he's but it was just one of the most wonderful things, saying, when someone says, if it wasn't for, for I wouldn't be here today. And that's what, I think is, again, as a son, when people like Cat Stevens, who've sold it, and again, fathers and son podcast, but it is it was just a great moment. And it was lovely, especially with the chap from, I was at school with, just saying earlier, saying, "Oh, of course, your dad, discovered Cat Stevens." And it's one of those things that you think, I bet at the time he was saying, yeah. You say he did this, you say he did that, and there it was right in front of all these people. That was a great moment. You were quite embarrassed, Dad.
Yeah, I was proud as well. It's okay, I do get embarrassed by that. But that's life. That's good.
But again, I have to say, by the way, folks, I love a bit of Glastonbury, and I love going to concerts, and again, because of my, should we say, privileged upbringing, I have been to an awful lot of gigs in my time, because doors have opened and whatever. Glastonbury, seeing Cat Stevens, and as a warm-up for Elton John, I'll tell you what, you're a very lucky man, because he was absolutely out of this world. And again, he went on to write some great songs after, as you said,
Sure.
First Colours of Tea, Fathers and Peace Train. Great songwriter. And that's one of the things I would love to have been able to do, is to write a song that that people recognise. Father and Son, just great songs. So, I've been very privileged in my upbringing, and I've met a lot of people through both my father, Chris Pears, and you, Dad. And it's not often you can sit down and say, "Do you know, Cat Stevens used to come have his strawberry sandwiches."
Yes, he loved his strawberry sandwiches.
Would come in. So then, really, for the future, what would you give? What kind of advice would you give? So, and let's say became a pop star, and then
I know what you're going to ask me.
Go.
I know what you're going to say to me. It always comes to this. What do you think of the music today?
Yes.
And the answer's always the same, I'm afraid. I'm a song man. I come from a time of songs. What do I mean by that? I mean songs that stick in the mind and it makes you want to sing them very often in the car. I've just been coming back from Cornwall last week with your brother, with Joe. And Joe, he's eclectic in his musical taste. He loves Sinatra, he loves the music of the 1940s and the 50s.
The big bands.
And we're singing these songs, he and I, in the car, over and over, more songs. We knew all the words, we're singing away. Today, most of the songs that are written, I've just been listening this morning to the British Eurovision entry for whenever it is this year. I hate it. I hate it. And the reason I hate it is I don't think it's fair to music with a capital M. What do I think of music today? I think the trouble is technology has overtaken music. Technology is everything, because you don't need a studio like Olympic Barnes used to be, like CTS used to be. You don't need them anymore. You can make, in quality terms, you can make your record at home or in a reasonable sized room or whatever, no problem at all. But what's happened, therefore, is that people who write songs today, they don't think of how will this song last? How will it live? What message, if necessary, am I trying to put across? What's the lyric? My favorite lyric line of a not a contemporary, but of after the 1950s and 60s, Paul Simon. Paul Simon is one of the greatest lyricists I've ever heard. And one of his songs, Train in the Distance, has his wonderful lines. What is the point of this story? What information pertains? The thought that life could be better is woven indelibly into our hearts and our brains. That is poetry. And that, to me, is as good as any of the great poets of the last 200 years. It's fantastic. And that's what I wait to hear again today. I want someone to come along who writes great songs. You'll never be totally original, Tim. You know that. It's all been done. Everything's a copy of a copy of a copy. It's just how you alter bits here and there to make them sound slightly more original. But there'll be someone out there. There's somebody there now. They haven't made it yet, but they will. And hopefully with great songs.
And because they tell stories, don't they?
That's country music too. And that's why country music, I think, is still so big. Is it's the only music form left that has a story in most of its songs. It either makes you laugh or it makes you want to cry, whatever. But that's country music.
Because country music outside, I mean, we only have to look at Tay-Tay and I mean,
Garth Brooks.
Garth Brooks, I mean, sells more records.
He's never sold any records in this country. He's the biggest selling record artist solo artist of all time. 150 million albums plus. My God, that's a lot of records.
The advice you'd give to any aspiring producer, get the song right.
And believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself and your artist, then it's a waste of time. That's my advice to a producer. Get something. When someone comes along to you, if you want to be an artist or a record producer, when someone comes along and says, I can help you, and you look at them and say, how can you help me? You're a bricklayer. Or how can you help me? You're an accountant. If they really believe in you, if they really think you're potentially great, use them. Use them. Because they'll put some money up for you, you'll find out whether you're right or wrong. But that's a producer. A producer is a wonderful, I think is a wonderful thing. Because what you're doing is you're pulling all the pieces together. And if you put them together right, you built a great house.
So it's the jigsaw puzzle.
It's the jigsaw puzzle, sure.
Just a quick question, and I should. After basically Cat Stevens, what was the first artist you produced after you and Yusuf went in different directions?
Yeah.
What was the? I mean, and was it? And did you suddenly think I'm going to go through the old Cat Stevens, catalogue of songs? Let's use one particular song. Sorry, so who was the first artist? Was it an immediate artist?
No, it was the dreaded New World again. That was in
really?
71. But Fancy, we've got to finish. I'll get bored with us in a minute. Fancy, Ray Fenwick, Mo Foster, Les Binks, Annie Kavanagh. We had a huge hit in America with Wild Thing.
Oh, yeah.
Which was great.
Very sexy.
And that was the first thing I did after Steve and I really broke up. And it was a huge hit in America. Nothing here because it was too sexy, apparently. Disgusting record, it was referred to. Yeah, it was, purposely. But it made it.
The other track, of course, on that was touched me. So, of course, I suppose any record executive is looking at it and going, hang on. Thank you, Dad, for joining me in my inaugural, as I said, podcast. And hopefully people, you will tune in because there will be others. Because Dad has got so many stories. And again, it'd be lovely to just catch up more about the 60s, that special time. And I'd love to know more songs that, inspired you in the, when you were producing this. But the 60s, as you said, it was just a special time. And hopefully in weeks to come and whatever, we can talk some more. And
We'll do it again, Tim. We'll do it again.
That would be great because, and also your input in the pirate radio station, as well, about how at the time songs were being plugged on those pirate radio stations.
We can do this, Tim. We will.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you, folks, for joining me and joining us on my first podcast. So hopefully I haven't bored you. I certainly know that Dad hasn't, but yes, I can talk forever.
Say goodbye, Tim.
Goodbye. Yes, I'm going. Bye. It's gone.